We have a really, really exciting panel for you guys. It combines some of the most interesting companies in the media space right now. And without further ado, while people are still heading back in from drinking coffee, hanging out at the rooftop, I would like to introduce a panel that is all about how to create messages, content and visualization, and user experience that are actually being read. And we have not only the New York Times, not only Giphy, not only BuzzFeed, not only Bounce Exchange, but all of them together talking about this. And I'm very excited to announce Anna, Ophir, Philip, Nam, Dan, and Mahir on stage. Thank you, guys.
I'll take this end, yeah. Okay, thank you. Suppose you can all hear me. So, thanks for having us. This is a fantastic panel, and my name's Ann Bauer. I work at the New York Times as a data scientist. I'd like to have us all introduce ourselves first, and then we'll ask some questions, and then at the end have maybe about 10 minutes for audience Q&A. So to start with introducing myself, as I said, I'm a data scientist at the New York Times. I've been working there for about a year and a half. I've been working on a number of projects involving messaging and personalization in messaging, making sure that the journalism at the Times is trying to get to its most ideal audience and be read, in fact, by the audience. And I came to data science and the New York Times from a research background in physics, working with big data analysis in that regard. So moving on, Dan?
My name's Dan Oshinsky. I'm the director of newsletters at BuzzFeed. Been building a team there since 2012. We send newsletters on all sorts of things: news, DIY, cats, and yeah, that's me.
My name is Philip, and I'm bootstrapping a company called Missive, and we're building an email client that actually bring team collaboration right inside of it. So think of it as a mashup between Gmail and Slack. So let's say you receive a newsletter, you can chat with your teammates around it. You receive user requests, important email from investors, partners. It's a way to collaborate and exchange right where important information is already is.
I'm Nam. I currently run product at a company called Giphy. We are an animated search engine for GIFs. I'll go ahead now and say that I say GIFs with a hard G before someone goes, well, is it GIF or GIF? It's definitely GIF. And yeah, we have websites, mobile apps, an entire platform that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Hey, I'm Ophir. I run product for Bounce Exchange, our behavioral email platform, where we do a lot of triggered emails based on behaviors that people are taking online and using that as the best means of segmentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mahir. I'm the creative director of data science and visualization team at RGA. For those who don't know, RGA is a full service and product agency, and we are helping our clients to understand the capabilities, creative capabilities of data and how they can use and utilize data to improve their businesses.
Great, thanks. Now I'd like to start with a useful but rather specific question. Now, segmentation and targeting is clearly one of the factors that make your messages interesting to read for the audience that's receiving them. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what is some of the user information that you find most helpful in your companies in segmenting your audiences so that your messages actually are read by the people to whom they're sent.
I'll take a stab at this first. BuzzFeed, our segmentation is very, very simple. We look at a couple things. The big one is location, where you are in the world. Some of our emails will segment based on where you are. It allows us, if you're, as our audience grows to countries like the UK, to India, to Australia, to get the right content to the right audience. A lot of our segmentation, though, is very, very, very simple. When we first started, it was just me on the newsletter team. Now there's a bunch of us around the world. But we created a really simple page, BuzzFeed.com/email. Instead of starting with a handful of instead of starting with more general newsletters that could be segmented based on interests or what you like or what you've clicked, we just created a bunch of different newsletters. A lot of the segmentation kind of accidentally happens up front, where you're signing up for DIY, you're signing up for food, you're signing up for emails about beauty, health. That allows us to reach the right audience right away. It's very simple. It's uncomplicated. There is no data whatsoever behind it. Sorry.
I think segmentation is one of those data domains that is like shifting quite fast right now, because the typical segmentation is based on like gender, location, and maybe the engagement rate and those kind of stuff. But what we're trying to do with our clients is convincing them that there's this thing called micro-segmentation, and actually it's temporal. What I mean by that, I can be in the same segment with a 14-year-old kid from Germany at a certain time of the day, based on the context that I'm consuming that email or message coming from the brand. But in another time, I can be in the same segment with a guy, 70-year-old from Vermont, right? So like how we can identify like these behavioral and contextual changes in the segments, and how we can actually adapt the content based on that. So that's our perspective on it. It's not easy. You need a lot of different data points. And most of the big organizations, they are still using very, antiquated email marketing tools. So, but there is a great opportunity there. And I think if we understand more about the behavior of the users and the context of the content consumption, actually we can do like much better segmentation.
Yeah, and I think on that note too, like kind of just segmenting by gender is incredibly outdated. Like we said, it's like some people are going to want to shop for men's things and vice versa. So I think that's a really good point.
Does your answer differ if instead of targeting content, we're talking about targeting design or tone? Is this a question that you tend to attack simultaneously to content, or do you consider the user experience design a very separate issue? Okay, I'm sorry. I can hear myself through the speaker from right here, so yeah. No, I just wanted to refocus the previous question also onto issues of visual user experience and design rather than only content. And if this was something that you focus on in your work.
So I'll take a stab at answering this from a different perspective, because for Giphy, we're all about inserting animated content wherever you are, whether it's messaging, email, I guess that's messaging now, but one thing that we paid a lot of attention to before Giphy was where it is today was we knew that not every GIF was created equal. GIFs have different file sizes. If anyone's ever made a GIF, they know that they can be quite clunky. GIFs have different file dimensions, so you could have a GIF at 10 pixels wide or 1,000 pixels wide. And so what we do as a platform is every GIF that comes into our system, we transcode it into dozens and dozens of renditions. And so we offer GIFs, sorry about that. We offer GIFs at, multiple sizes, different formats. So we have MP4s of every GIF, WebPs of every GIF, GIFs at different dimensions. We have GIFs at fixed width 100, fixed width 200. These were all done in anticipation of the clients we would work with. So if we knew that one day we'd work with Facebook Messenger and Facebook Messenger wanted to integrate GIFs, they probably want GIFs at a certain size, at a specific dimension, at a specific format. And so we did all that thinking a little bit beforehand, put that into our system, and that allowed us to actually have these conversations with, email clients like MailChimp and Outlook who have us integrated today. And we basically removed that barrier so that we could work with them.
So I just want to follow up on that. I think content optimization is very critical based on the segments of the audience as well. But what I'm thinking that email is a form of communication tool that we invented a while ago, and it originally derives from letters, right? And SMS, maybe it was the second thing, and now we see more and more chatbots, and I think there was also a conversation around that earlier today. So all these things are basically opportunities to communicate ideas, right? So what we are trying to understand, like again, maybe, I'm gonna go back to the behavior example, but what is the behavior of the user when they read an email? I think Medium, Medium.com, the data science team at Medium, they're doing a great job about understanding their audience, how they consume that particular content. And what we are trying to do at RGA, advising our clients that how they should understand all these different mediums and the behavior of people, how they actually use those mediums, and optimize the content based on that. So sometimes we see that the clients, they just want to create a chatbot which is kind of trying to simulate their email newsletter, which is obviously is not going to work, right? So I think we need to understand more that, how people actually want to consume the content and optimize everything. Like, if not necessary, there's nothing visual. If it's a better idea, optimize the subject line, right? But maybe it's not a bad idea, it's not a good idea, so you just don't do that. Like, it all depends on the context of the platform.
Right. Oh, sorry, I just want to follow up briefly about that, because you're talking about having different types of content that lend themselves better to different channels. But conversely, do you recommend that certain types of users get the same message but through different channels depending on the user?
I think that's a great question, because right now what's happening, I think we all experience this in different ways. We cannot read all of our tweets. We cannot read all of our emails. We cannot see all the updates from our friends on Facebook, right? And all these companies, they are introducing algorithms to optimize it for us. And this has a lot of backlash going on right now. Like, everyone hates these algorithms and stuff. We have to find ways to understand the signal from the noise during our busy daily life. But there is no great answer to that yet. I think the right answer is, like, one school of thought might be like going completely data-driven and collecting even more data, so we can super personalize and customize every algorithm for each individual. Another school of thought would be also like eliminating some of the noise, like manually. So I don't have a great answer to this, but I think it's a very valid question. Maybe some other people want to check.
Were you going to say something over here?
Yeah, I was going to say something else about the segmentation piece of understanding kind of how people are interacting with different channels. Should definitely guide, how you're speaking to them on the channel that you're managing. So for email, Bounce Exchange, we like to see how did people come in from different channels. Did they come in from referrals, social? How do they engage with that? That tells you a lot about people's behaviors and what they're interested in. And again, that's kind of free segmentation in a way, right? You don't have to ask these questions of them. It's things that that actions they've taken in other channels. So it's kind of something you were talking about before, but I just wanted to make sure to touch upon that, because I think that is super crucial when it comes to segmentation and offering the right message.
I'll share, I guess, how we think about segmentation, at least within Giphy. So we know that most GIFs come from existing content, right? A GIF is a 3-second clip from a 4-minute video. And for you to see that 3-second clip, some person actually made that GIF, hosted it on their website, and now you see it. But the GIF that the best GIF you've ever seen was sent to you from your friend. And so that means your friend took it and communicated it to you. And so if you think about that, that's 2 layers of curation before the GIF actually gets to you. And so we've implemented that philosophy into our systems as a way to curate the content basically before you see it. And we think of Giphy as being like your friend. And so when we deliver that content, most people don't realize it, but it's usually been blessed by someone within our team to say that this is a good pizza GIF out of the million pizza GIFs that exist. And that has allowed us to continue to grow as people continue to search and want to share animated GIFs across whatever platform they're on.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to talk about in more detail, the balance between manual curation and algorithmic curation. Because with algorithmic curation, you can take loads of data, you can make very complex decisions based on whatever complicated nonlinear combination of all of these pieces of information. But with manual curation, you have a reliably high quality of result. And so I was wondering how you all deal with this balance of the high quality versus the scalability and the complexity that's available by algorithmic decisions.
We have the least complicated technical back end of anyone here in this room, I guarantee you. Our system, there is some algorithmic value for us. We have my team in New York, there's 4 of us, and we do use a handful of tools that our amazing data team at BuzzFeed has built to help us find the right stories to share, the right stories for the right audience. But when it comes to actually putting our emails out into the world, we do very little besides, like I said, location-based segmentation. We have found it hasn't been that helpful. When the other thing for us is it requires quite a bit of work. And when you're a small team, I think what we were saying is totally right. You have to make trade-offs somewhere. For us, the value that we placed was on hiring a small team that could produce a lot of work and could be really nimble in switching between different newsletters and switching between different teams. But that means that we can't focus on other things like a more complex data segmentation system. So it is pretty scalable, we found. I mean, we have this team of 4 produces 50 to 60 newsletters a week across a variety of different verticals at BuzzFeed. We produce a lot of work and reach a ton of eyeballs every single week. It's just, it's about building, for us, it's about building systems that allow us to really get our stuff out there and working with partners. We work with a company called Campaign Monitor that we work with them to build out really simple templates that allow us to crank out newsletters quickly and get the content out.
Yeah. One of the reasons I joined Bounce Exchange and that I was so passionate about the company is because, we're almost kind of fit into like a third branch of what you're discussing, right? Which is like segmentation based on behavior. So we call it listening, right? So listening to what people are doing online and using that as a form of deciding who gets what email. And yes, it's a lot of work up front to set up that kind of segmentation, set up those triggers, set up that technology. But once you let it run, right, it's the smartest kind of segmentation, and it's incredibly accurate, right? It's somebody saying, I'm interested in this, I'm doing this, send me a newsletter or an email or a message that speaks to this behavior. So I think that's a really interesting kind of way that, or place that email is going now is behavioral email, which is, part of why I joined the team. That's something that I was really passionate about when I was on the client side in-house. It was these triggered sends, because I felt like that was something that really spoke to people, really made them feel like the brand knows what they want, what they're interested in, and it's a highly relevant message.
I think I like to refer to the name of our panel. There's a big UX factor in algorithm-driven marketing, because in my opinion, we live in this time that humans are trying to speak like computers, and computers are trying to speak like humans, and that just fails, right? We use Boolean logic to search stuff. Like, that's not how we search things in life. So what we are trying to do more and more, like this time is gonna pass, right? There will be, I'm a firm believer of AI, and I think it's gonna happen. I don't know when, but it will happen one day. But until that moment that you have the seamless experience with a machine that is not a human, you have to be very upfront about the user experience. Like if you onboard people, I think there's great features of algorithmic content creation. Like I like to enjoy getting a special deal from my seamless. And I know that it's a machine, but it's a good deal, and it's timely, and it's a text message. I can click on that and get the deal. And it needs to be just upfront. If algorithms trying to fake that they are not, I think that's the moment that it just fails right now. And I think that is the user experience problem more than an algorithm or logic or data problem.
Yeah, one more thing in that. I think that's so true, and a lot of people kind of ask the question of well, how do I get the messages read? How do I get them in the inbox? I think it's all about UX. Also, it's all about what the user wants. Do you think that this email is something that your consumer is interested in? And always thinking of the customer first, whether it's you're working in a store or you're sitting behind a computer like we are and sending messages. It's all about is this relevant to the person I'm sending it to? I think that's ultimately what creates a good user experience. Because if you look at your inbox, right, everybody probably gets 1,000 emails. Maybe one is relevant to you, right? me personally, I don't really care about, new arrivals. Like, it's not something that's relevant to me. So it might be relevant to somebody else, but always thinking about what is it that this person wants to see in their inbox based on what they've engaged with, what they've told us about themselves. I think that sounds really obvious, but it's really important to understand, like, what is it that they ultimately want to see in their inbox.
So switching gears a little bit away from content targeting to the fact that everybody uses a variety of different email clients, and these email clients have different design compatibilities, and how do you manage sending a consistent user experience when your recipients have this variety of email clients through which they're receiving your message?
Well, myself, I'm a bit of the outsider here because I'm not really from the content side. I create an actual email client. But what I can say, and I may be the living proof, is that the way people will consume those messages in email is going to change more and more, and there's many companies trying to reinvent the way the email client works or the way you consume those messages. Just looking at smart categories from inbox, some people hate them because it do a curation from them, and they don't want that. But a lot of people are finding it critical to the way they manage their own inbox. And me with Missive, there's a lot of people migrating from Gmail, and they'll just say, why isn't there categories? Why aren't your email client kind of curating my inbox? Well, it's not something we do now, but I think the expectation are growing, and the way those people consume email will change. And another example, the way we do it is that if you send a newsletter to someone at Missive, people can kind of start to chat around it in the company, but you won't never know about it because it's inside our own ecosystem. And I talk about other guys today here doing a startup call, I think was Forward Everyone. And it's just an easy way to take an email conversation and make it public. And I think we will see more and more things like that. So if it's a conversation you have customer support, well, expect it might become public. If it's a good newsletter, people will find new way to share it. And I think it's interesting.
In terms of, on our end, designing stuff for a bunch of different email clients, Gmail just made some big changes in the last couple of weeks. I have gotten used over the last couple of years to having to explain to people why the brand new email client that they have just downloaded does not work with our emails. They'll tell me about the brand new app they just downloaded. It's so great. How come our emails don't work? And then that sends me off to try to figure out how to fix it. There are so many, and the thing that, as we have gone through our process of trying to design really good emails for a huge variety of users in so many different countries, our emails keep getting simpler and simpler. And the less complicated they are in terms of design, honestly, the more we can focus on using design to inspire some sort of action. And it depends on the newsletter. In our newsletter, you're looking to get people the information they need in 3 minutes or less, and the whole experience takes right there in the inbox. With other newsletters, we're trying to push people to a place, to an app, to our website, and trying to use design to inspire that action. But for the most part, our emails are incredibly simple and uncomplicated in terms of design because it works across the most possible platforms. That being said, I'm sure in the time that I just said this, there is a brand new email client that I'm going to have to design something new for when I get back to the office.
Or just not read mobile version anymore, which is a really fun one.
Yeah.
Sure. So, for us, ideally, the email has no text and just a GIF. And that's another way to say that, we really push for people to communicate visually. And so the way that I'm going to tackle this question by talking about how we work with the content partners who are creating content to be then consumed in emails. So right now we work with about, 5,000 or so big brands, pretty much anyone that owns content on the internet, from HBO to major TV networks and a lot of sports teams, sports leagues, fashion, music stars, etc. And they're beginning now to realize, okay, GIFs do perform pretty well in email, but we don't have any GIFs. But again, they have video, and so what they're doing now is creating content from existing videos. But what we're seeing in that's happening more and more so often is they're creating them from scratch, but they're creating them from scratch with knowing how people are communicating in email in mind. So for example, if you wanted to make sure that if anyone were to say yes in an email or anyone wanted to say no in an email, Rihanna probably wants to make sure that she's got a yes GIF right inside of Giphy. And that's kind of the behavior we've seen changed in the last 2 or 3 years. That's been quite effective. And so nowadays, when you're sending that yes Rihanna GIF inside of your email or inside of Facebook or Twitter, a lot of that was actually designed to be that way. But we don't want people to know that.
Thanks. Well, for a retrospective and forward-facing question, messaging has, in the past, been a secondary communication platform where the main part of a company is often its website. But now messaging is becoming more important and people are starting to get their primary information through this medium instead of just going to a company's website. And has this evolution changed your roles in the past couple of years in a significant way? And do you see, well, let's do the retrospective first. Have you seen this change affect your role specifically in the past months or years?
Well, I think since we have to adapt all the new platforms immediately and also understand what are the new data points we can capture from those platforms to learn more about how actually that platform works, I can say that my role is changing all the time. And I'm not sure what will happen next, but right now it is very visible that there's a big competition going on, and actually that's the reason why we have all these new email clients, new messaging platforms, because the time that any individual who can engage with any brand or any other third party is very, very little right now. Like during the whole day, you have maybe less than 10 seconds for one brand, and even that slot is reserved, and there's a competition for that. So you have to understand very clearly that what makes that moment unique for whatever message you are trying to deliver, right? And I think messaging and the conversational interfaces, they are the great example of this change. But this is going to bring a lot of challenges especially for brands and companies, but also it's going to bring a lot of challenge for us to manage this noise, right? So because they're all going to strike, and then right now we have smart email clients, like they just put everything into the promotions tab, and we don't see most of them. But so I think that is a very big change to me. But at the same time, the original problem remains the same. Like everyone is trying to find a channel to communicate, and how that's, I think the UX is very important, because sometimes also stepping out of the pattern, like even though that you see, oh, these are the successful patterns of communication based on data, but you do something completely different on purpose. And I think Giphy, for example, is a great example. Like you send a GIF out of the blue as a brand. I don't think there are many brands right now they can brave, like they are doing those brave moves yet, but they might. And then that's actually the email or message that people will open. So I think my role is going back and forth between this, understanding the user experience and expectation, as well as understanding the data coming from that new platform, emerging environment, and trying to find the right balance between fulfilling that original goal, which is the communication itself.
One thing to say on this is at Giphy, we know that we didn't invent the GIF. The GIF has been around for 30 or so years. But what we did know is we saw an opportunity to build all the pipes to make this all possible. And so I think to answer your question about understanding the messaging landscape, I was always sending GIFs to my friends where possible. It was supported in iMessage without, I think, iMessage even knowing, right? Like you could send it in email and people would ask how you did it. It was like I dragged the GIF into Gmail and it played and I sent it. And so in a way, we were a company built on, I think, the opportunity of seeing that messaging is going to be the big platform. And 3 years ago, we could have said, all right, let's put all of our focus on Giphy.com, the website, the destination site. But what we knew is people probably aren't going to go to Giphy.com every day, but they probably go to Gmail every day, and they probably go to Facebook every day. And so that's when we made the decision that Giphy is a platform, and that everything that our website and our mobile apps can do, we want other clients to be able to do too. And so we have a bunch of public APIs that anyone can consume. When I joined the company, we were serving, I think, a couple thousand GIFs a day. And as of today, we serve over 1 billion. And that's over the course of 3 years. Lots of late nights making sure that that happens. And believe me, when you get an email from Facebook, and they're like, hey, where are the GIFs? You're like, Jesus Christ, what world am I in? But it's a good problem to have, and we're pretty excited to kind of keep that growing. But that's kind of how we've been able to, I guess, tackle this new messaging landscape.
What I'll say on my end, I was thinking about that. I love this question because I was thinking about this my way over here. I was reading the paper and flipping through the New York Times, and on the front page of the business section this morning, there's a Farhad Manjoo article that says, "Email is dead and not a moment too soon." Congratulations, guys, we did it. For me, email is fascinating because email, I think if you're coming from our end at BuzzFeed, where our emails are much more curated, and we've tried to design them where they're from a person, and we want them to feel like they're from a friend. It's a personal email, it's a personal connection, and a one-to-one kind of delivery system. If you're doing that, if you're doing more targeted emails that build in a lot of awesome algorithms and personalization on the back end, also amazing. Email is great when it is personal. And the apps, these messaging apps especially, are a continuation of that. I don't think it's changed my job necessarily, but I expect that it will in the coming years as we try to use what we've learned in email to build better messaging apps that are personal, that deliver great information, personal information in a timely context. Hopefully some of that will come back to email too and make email better. I mean, email is certainly not dead, but we have to keep improving it, and we have to continue iterating it to a point where it delivers a great experience day in and day out. Because there's lots of great competitors now for people in the workplace, in personal spaces, to talk to your friends, to talk to your coworkers. But at the end of the day, for me, I check email when I wake up in the morning. I check it on the way to work. I check it at work. It's the last thing I do before I go to bed. It is, and the newsletters and the emails that I let into my inbox they're from really trusted brands and close brands, or they're from family and friends. And it's a pretty personal space. It's kind of a living room for me. So hopefully we have to keep improving it so that way we can keep this awesome delivery channel alive.
Yeah, I think one really interesting thing that you said too is how do we use other channels to make email stronger and vice versa. I think that's something that a lot of people aren't focusing on right now, and that's something that at Bounce Exchange we're constantly thinking of is how do we fuel that fire that comes from email, other channels, and vice versa, right? Because at the end of the day, it's one person engaging with the brand. So how do you continue that message across different channels and train them to understand this brand really gets me, right? They're sending me the right emails, they're targeting me correctly on Facebook, whatever other means there are, right? SMS, whatever there is. I think it's important to make sure that whatever company you work for, that it's all super uniform, because that really trains the customer to want to shop with you, to want to consume your content. And so, exactly like you said, I think that's super crucial, is not to think of email in a vacuum, because there's a lot of noise, a lot of other channels, a lot of other means of communication in the space.
Definitely. Phil, do you want to talk a bit about how you've clearly seen that email by itself is less successful than email plus chat together, and what this can do?
Well, I think, with the rise of Slack and chat app for businesses, I think the conversation should be more, I think email is mostly dead, but for modern companies, for internal communication, because there was a lot of wasted resources when you try to forward email internally, CC email. So that's one place where chat and messaging app for business is I think more relevant than email. But if you want to message someone from outside your organization, your go-to app is your email client, because everyone has an email address. You can expect him to receive that email, to probably read it if it's a business email. So I don't think email is going away, at least for businesses. And it's funny because for me, email is just business. And I think for a lot of people now, email is just business. I'm subscribed for all my newsletter now is just on Facebook, and family is just Facebook. I follow some brand on Twitter, but my email is just business, responding to customers, partners, and building our company from inside the email client. It's the reason why we built Missive. It's the idea that the place where you have your most important communication for your own company is with email, with partners, investors. So that would be the best place to actually collaborate with your team internally. And in our case, you just chat around those emails.
I like to add something to this. I think it's a great point about why email is not going to be dead. So if you look at like all the platforms, especially messaging platforms and Slack, those are individual companies. Like I cannot use just Slack on my own. I register through their system, right? But email is the still existing communication form that can run independently from any other big organization. Many people use Gmail, that's fine, but you are still you can use your own email if you want. So that's one of the main reasons why email is not going to dead, in my opinion, forever. But then the other challenge for email, which is I think like messaging platforms and Slack, they are more intimate and they are more close circle relationship communication channels. So I think that's one of the challenges for brands today that they're trying to get into the Facebook Messenger domain, but your current chat history on Facebook Messenger is very much different than talking to a brand, right? So they're still trying to figure out how to get into that domain. So email has its own categorization in our mind that it is a special way of consuming content, and I think that's the second advantage that email might be go much lower in terms of numbers, but it's not going to be that.
My personal thought on this is that I hope that email comes back in the strongest way possible. I work with so many messaging apps these days where it's like, cool, deliver this content at rapid speeds, and it's relevant, it's great. But the problem with that is it's so messy and annoying that if any of you guys use Slack or HipChat or whatever inside of your workforces, you know that when you come back to it, it's got 100 different unread messages, and you got people asking you a bunch of garbage, and you're like, well, this is not a priority. And I think that has nothing to do with the platform. That has to do with the person not thinking before writing. The one thing about email is you have to think before you write it, because it is like an email forever. It can be forwarded, it can be screenshotted. It will, you say something dumb there, it's forever. And so that's one thing why I hope email comes back, because I think people will not just kind of ping you at any given moment they have an idea. They're going to think about it. And then the second part, which is the best part about email to me, is that you can read it and then you can mark it as unread and then think about it later. With chat, you can do that, but then that person's kind of will look over at you and be like, oh, did he see my message? He's at his computer. Did he see it? And I think that's just kind of that's just kind of insane. And so I hope that email comes back.
Yeah, I think one other thing too, in terms of like you said, and like you guys said, email's not going anywhere. I mean, when was the last time you went to a store and somebody was like, would you like this receipt? Facebook message to you. But not yet, right? So everything I think transactionally is tied to email, right? And that's a really powerful means of communication. And I just, think that that's not, maybe I'll be wrong a year from now, but right now I don't see that that's going anywhere. I think that's, again, something that is very personal, like you said, right? Your receipt. That's not something that you want to share necessarily on Facebook or put on Twitter. So again, just like you said, that's kind of your personal inbox. It's reserved for very specific things. And I think that's a whole other kind of arena of email and it's kind of the leading area for that to live in.
I should also, on the last thing I was going to say, I should also mention that I know that people are crazy on Slack because I'm that person. I'll chat someone and then look at them and then be like, geez, oh my God, I'm crazy now. I'm going to send that person an email. Sorry.
Giving them a bad user experience.
Yeah, I just need that.
Just one thing to add to the last point is, I think the receipt is a great example. So email is actually there in its current form right now because also it represents how our mental logic functions in life. We have files and systems and stuff on our desk, right? When we print out things, we organize them. So we don't have post-its about every single small detail in our life. all around the room, right? So that's like, it's almost like Messenger and conversational UI is like that. You cannot run your whole life in that logic. So you also need that moment that you can unread things and you can think about, you can take your time to understand and respond properly, right?
I'd say that's one of my favorite things about email is that email, you can be super organized. I do think that way in terms of folders and files. It's also my least favorite thing about email because I will occasionally do that thing where you look over a coworker's shoulder when they're checking their phone and you'll see how many unread messages they have at the bottom. And you realize that some of your coworkers are monsters. 10,000 there are people at my office who will have competitions that be like, look, I have 14,000 unread messages. Monsters. But the great thing about email is it can be organized that way and it can be used in a lot of different ways. The worst thing is it can be used in a lot of different ways and you never really know how people are using it. And I think that's a struggle for all of us up here who are trying to use email for a variety, for newsletters, for work, for sharing ideas, for all sorts of different purposes. It is a challenge because email is used in so many different ways. What is the right case for you? What is email even for these days? I think that presents a huge challenge for all of us as marketers, as users, trying to figure out how to take advantage of the right aspects of email and match it with an audience that actually cares and is going to use it in the same way.
Okay, so on that note, I'd like to open it up for some audience questions. Yes?
Thank you. So I'm going to use the dirty word, millennials. And someone actually had a funny story earlier where he sent an email to a group of 15-year-olds and they said, I didn't get your email. And then it's like, oh, I can show you. And they were showing like a text messaging app. So I was curious how, especially thinking about how the world is changing and how millennials communicate, what that means when you think about the UX factor and how messages, especially via email, because it seems like for a certain group, emailing is dying very quickly or dead. So how does this change when you think about this brave new world of millennials?
I'm sure BuzzFeed has something to say about that. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. One of the things that I always think about with email is, and you kind of touched upon this earlier, nowadays, millennials are not, unfortunately. You have like 5 seconds of somebody's attention when they're opening an email. So what is it that you're trying to communicate with them and get to it as quickly as possible, right? The days of kind of having like long emails with like this promotion and that promotion and also this, plus new arrivals, plus sale, I think that's over. Like no one has time to consume that and they're just gonna go to the next email because there's 10,000 other ones. So I think the key point, and again, it sounds really simple, but if you base everything you do on this concept, I think it's super powerful, is what is the message you're trying to communicate with this particular email and how can you communicate it the most efficiently, in the most engaging and the most fun manner. And that's something that we do a lot of Bounce Exchange, right? Everything we design is we make sure that it is beneficial to the end user, it's powerful, but that's also fun and it's a pleasure to open in the inbox, right? And I think that's kind of one way to kind of combat that dirty word millennial way of engaging with email.
For us, it's funny because I went to a customer office last week, and one of the boss was an old man, and it was his younger employee who was telling him, well, we need to reinvent the way we actually collaborate inside the company, because okay, right now, me as a 30 years old, I know how to use email and it's fine, but what about in 5 years when we gonna hire a new sales rep? They will want a new way, they're used to texting, messaging, and yes, we still, send email to customers, but inside of our own company, we need to modernize the way we actually communicate. And it's a bit what we're trying to do with Missive is that, a lot of companies now are using Slack and still using email individually. They each have their own inbox and then they communicate in Slack. And the problem we see is that it creates many silos. It's the same thing when you said, well, we have all those open apps, Facebook Messengers, Twitter, Snapchat. 2 years ago, my family was just on Facebook. Now they're on Facebook and Snapchat. So you have all those silos, and it's so hard to find the relevant information. And what we're trying to do with the business aspect of it is the merging back chat, which is more efficient a lot of the time, and emails in one centralized place that makes sense. And the way we do it is that instead of having email thread, it's just conversation that you can archive, you can mark as unread, you can snooze, you can send later. But those conversations are not just composed of email, but a mix of emails and chat messages you have with your team. So I think it's a really powerful way of thinking of, email can be, chat can be a support to better emailing, and that's kind of our own philosophy. If we reduce the frictions to collaboration, people will collaborate more and create, be better at emailing to customers, partners, and whatnot.
I will share briefly a story. About 2 weeks ago, I was getting dinner with a friend who works in marketing here in the city, and he said, I have this presentation this week on Gen Zennials. What is a Gen Zennial? Oh, it's the generation after millennials, the younger people, the 12 to 15-year-olds or whatever. They're the next ones coming up. So millennials are already dead. Gen Zennials are in. And then whatever the 6-year-olds are is the next. Who knows? There are so many. They keep coming, and they're all so young, and they use technology differently. It makes me feel so old. BuzzFeed, all I'll say is we found that young people still open emails. A huge percentage of our email audience is young, and they're engaged. I can't speak for all young people, but they are still there. They still use it because they have a college email address. They still use it because they go to work, and like we were talking about, you still use email at work. It's still going to be a huge part of your day. If we can integrate it and work with other apps too, with messaging apps, with other social platforms, and be in a lot of different places, it's great. I don't know how it's going to play out in terms of transactional stuff in the long run. We'll see. Come back in 10 years, and we'll find out what the Gen Zennials wanted in the first place.
Maybe on Snapchat.
Snapchat receipts could be a thing. Who knows? We have no idea.
One thing I'll add to this is, and take it for what it's worth, but we work with a lot of email clients, platforms to get GIFs into emails, but we've done zero email marketing from Giphy's side from the beginning, and that was by design. This may or may not change as we get bigger, and we realize, all right, email is something that people still open, but we've opted out as long as we could have because, we just didn't want to send people emails. Which might get me jumped after this, but where I said it.
Just add one small thing to Gen Z discussion, which I think is a great point. Actually, millennials, I think they use email, but Gen Z, objectively speaking, they don't. But at the same time, if you, data is not something that you can just read in a very surface level, right? We are talking about kids, basically, between 12 to 16-year-old. Why they should use email? Obviously, if you compare the data, without any context, you will see a big discrepancy. They are using much less email. But I think it's also about the language, right? So their expectation of getting a digital message from a brand or another user is completely different than, how a millennial communicate. So most of the emails are optimized for number one consumer group, which obviously is not a 12-year-old kid. So when they get that message, they are not interested in that message because it's a different language that they don't speak. I think if brands can solve that language problem, I'm sure that they will open more emails.
Hi there. I thought this was going to be a panel talking about, how to write the perfect subject line and, clever copy tactics or what have you. And the more times I heard the word trust, it made me think that the sender's name is actually the most important factor. So assuming that's true, what are you guys doing with your product to earn that trust, to be consistent, and to get your email open based on the fact that it's coming from BuzzFeed or from Jiffy or from whomever?
Well, it's funny because when I send a newsletter for Missive, I'm always wondering, should I say Phil from Missive or from Missive team? Or I'm always wondering, struggling, do I, talk personally to our users, or do I impersonate all of our team? And of course, it may not be relevant, but in our case, when I use my personal name to send newsletters, I receive far more response, and there's far more engagement. So that might be an answer.
I think you're totally right. Trust is absolutely essential to what we do every single day, and a huge part of it. Subject lines do matter, pre-headers do matter, email design, great content, all matters. But there's a base level of trust you have to establish with your readers. We always try to just be friendly in general and think about how people use their inboxes on a daily basis. Something that we started doing a couple years ago, for instance. We do reactivation campaigns constantly, and if you guys have lists, I highly encourage it. Do reactivation campaigns. If people aren't opening your emails, check in with them. Our emails are really, really simple. Our reactivation emails, after doing lots of subject line testing, the correct subject line was, do you still want emails from us? And they're short. They have no GIFs anymore. We tried it with lots of different GIFs. Giphy was actually very helpful in that respect. They're very simple. They're like 4 lines and say, do you still want emails from us? We notice you haven't opened it in a while. Do you still want them? If so, click this button and we will opt you back in. If not, don't worry about it. We'll just stop sending you emails, because we thought it was the friendly thing to do. I hate when I get a brand. I'm wearing almost exclusively Old Navy clothes, but I'll say they email me like every 15 minutes to tell me about a sale and new arrivals. I don't care about new arrivals. I'm such an old man. I don't care. But we always try to think, what would be the friendly thing to do? What would you want if you were a recipient? So you just try to be friendly and try to establish trust and be good to them. Oh.
Yeah, to add to that, for Giphy, we look at trust as it actually defines our brand a lot. And so we knew from the get-go that, again, we were a tech company to start. We're kind of like a half tech, half media company now. But we wanted you to think that we were your friend. And so one way to be your friend is to call us by name. So I'll give you an example of when we launched our plugin for Slack, I guess 3 years ago. We had the option to say /GIF happy to send a happy GIF inside the chat, or /Giphy. I think everyone in the room that wasn't part of Giphy, we used to work inside of a company called BetaWorks. There were a bunch of techies in there. They were like, this is completely the wrong move. But the way that we approached it was like, we'd rather have someone say that I Giphy cat versus than I gift cat. And that has been a huge contributor to, I think, people being aware of our brand by the name Giphy, whether you know how to pronounce it or not. And so we think about those things in all of our implementations, even outside of email. But we don't send any emails. Not yet.
How are we doing on time? Time for another question?
I had one. Hi, my name is Michael. And I know with people that I meet, acquaintances, friends, my dialogue evolves over time with them. At first, it's very formal, and then as I meet them, then it's like it goes from a hello to a hi to a what's up to a I slap them on the back, give them a hug. With your communication with email, do you evolve that over time? Do you cohort your users so that maybe it's formal at the beginning, but then becomes very casual, almost like a long-term acquaintance near the end?
That's a really interesting question. At least I think the good news is that, well, maybe you can unsubscribe from friends, but I think you always have to kind of like balance that a little bit with email and not like, there is always that end result of somebody being able to unsubscribe from your emails or mark you as spam. So you never want to, I don't know what the way of like slapping somebody in the back in email is, but probably want to shy away from that. So I think for brands, maybe emailing too much, yeah. I think for brands, what I've seen is emailing kind of consistently, because when you think about like the first form of communication, like a welcome email, you want to be as upfront about what your brand stands for right away. You want to train your customers, your users, your email subscribers to understand what your brand voice is and what it is that they signed up for. So I think that is an interesting question, and there is definitely some room for that, maybe understanding who the person is. Do they want to be emailed every day or once a week? All those are things that you can evolve over time. But in terms of the kind of friendliness in your voice, I actually think it's really important to stay consistent and to stay true to your brand voice, because you want to train that subscriber from the get-go on what they should be expecting from brand X. I think it would be a little bit off-putting if all of a sudden you turn into a completely different brand and have a different mentality and different way of speaking. So I think there's definitely room for evolving kind of the way that you email people and what it is that end user wants. But in terms of brand voice and what it is you want to communicate, I think it's important to stay consistent.
So for us, we actually decided to slap you in the back first. We thought, and I'll use a Slack example, we wanted people to talk to each other the way they would if they were 5 years of friendship or they've worked with each other for 10 years. Because we know that at the end of the day, like, we're all people, we're all here to kind of just live life and like do our jobs. And so the minute that you can connect with someone on the same level, which is basically human, the better. And what's funny is we've actually had to go backwards from that, where at this point, every GIF actually has a rating underneath the hood in its metadata. And so we have like PG-rated GIFs, GIFs that are rated Y, PG-13, R, so that you can set that level of comfort between that conversation you're having with someone. But we push for people to get to know that person like as if they've known each other.
I think your question is really interesting because it's super culturally contextual, in my opinion. In certain cultures, you never develop that relationship to the high WhatsApp point. Like, you start with "Good morning, sir," you stay with "Good morning, sir" for many years, right? But I agree with most of the stuff. Like, if I get an email from Giphy, it's telling me "Good morning, sir," I would be like, what the hell is this? It's not Giphy's brand, right? It's somebody else is talking to me. So there's a brand value, but I just want to twist I think your intention is quite right, because what's going to happen most likely in the virtual assistants, we will start to see very bad examples of that relationship building first, like, especially in the smartphones, right? It's another form of communication tool with the assistant and us. So you wouldn't expect the assistant to be super informal at the beginning, but also you would like to see some relationship growing. It's going to be very challenging. I think there will be some algorithmic data-driven assistants, or maybe some brands can try this as well. They will try to develop that relationship, but that's very difficult because it's super cultural and individual.
One other thing on that note, the other thing that's so important, I think, about developing relationships, to your point, is that every single day, week, month, it becomes so much easier to unsubscribe. And working in email, that's like the most terrifying thing. People are like, oh my God, you hear from your friends. It's so easy to unsubscribe now on the iOS. It's just a button. I'm like, oh my God, it's a nightmare. It's a disaster. So if you always think about that, like every form of communication that you have, whether it's a transactional email or promotional email, a new arrivals email, you always want to keep that in mind and have the utmost respect for your subscriber, because in an instant they can unsubscribe from your emails. And I hope that that's not the case of somebody that you meet on the street, right? So we really do have not only 5 seconds of their attention, but we also have kind of like the worst possible scenario at our fingertips, which is somebody unsubscribing from your newsletter when they could be a valued customer.
In terms of the worst possible scenario, it just seems to me unopened emails has got to be a big issue for you all as well, I would think. So yes, people may not unsubscribe, but they may never open your emails after the second time. So to what extent do you monitor opening rates and I guess activity within the emails themselves? And when do you start panicking?
Do you guys want to go through real quick and say the KPIs you monitor? Open rate, clicks per thousand for us is a big one. We look at mobile open rates to make sure people are on the right platforms, because our audience is, I don't know what the number is now, probably 75% mobile, and we want to make sure our email rates are around there too. But if people don't open the emails, they don't open the emails. That's okay. I worry more when people do start to ignore us, it's frustrating. But if you set, what we were saying earlier, you set good expectations, you establish trust, they know what they're getting, why they're getting it. If you do a lot of the work up front to make sure that you're getting good leads into your email system, you end up with pretty strong open rates overall.
Yeah, exactly. I think we look at open rates, click-through rate, conversion rate, unsubscribe rate, and everybody's favorite, deliverability rate too, which is a whole different conversation that we'll save for another time. But all those are super important, and they're key metrics that you have at your disposal every single day. So I think it's all about analyzing and adapting towards that. If you're constantly sending to the same segment and they're opening at a 10% rate, and what you're used to saying was 20% before, that's something, right? How are you going to adapt to that? Maybe there's a certain segment on your list that is just not interacting with your email, so you send them one of those reactivation emails, and if they don't interact, then goodbye, because they could potentially be hurting those that are opening. So I think that is incredibly important, and it's something that you should monitor very heavily, just like you do revenue and you know, unsubscribe rate, open rate is huge, not just because it says, oh, this is how much people are interacting with my emails, but it also has to do with the health of your overall program as well.
Our KPI is a little bit different, but I'll mention some of that through the email clients we work with. So we have plugins for Gmail, Outlook, MailChimp, et cetera. Each implementation is different. So, you know, whether it's a 2-grid column masonry to 5 grids, you know, whatever it is, we measure how far people are scrolling to get to the right GIF, and then what people are actually searching for. And in that sense, we are able, having that data just at a very high level, we're able to deliver them the best content as fast as possible so that they can get that email going.
Yeah, I think they already mentioned all the KPIs, but I just want to add like one small twist to that. If your emails, like if certain segment is going dramatically down, then that technically means that you are losing the market share. So what we do, or what we advise to our clients in that case, like doing a strategic discovery, like who actually you are losing the market to, right? I think that's another thing that you cannot capture with data, but it's mostly very important because you can see easily that there's another competitor or, you know, a new startup emerging from somewhere, and some people are basically going there from that segment. So it's not only about, I think, you know, collecting all the KPIs, which is, in my opinion, is a must anyway, but also trying to understand the motivations behind the patterns that you see in the data.
Okay, thank you for your questions, and thank you to the panel.